The thing nobody's ever written accused me of being. It's funnier than you. Although the conditions of life, and hence man's mind, forever change, one thing remains constant, even amidst activity of this sort, and that is, whether you call it satori, enlightenment, awakening, or whatever, that's not it. Neither the dead nor the slippery need be comforted. Don't waste your time worrying about freeing the mind from its fetters, for as long as you think thoughts, the intellect is bound and chained. One man decided to make a list of the properties, the lack of which would constitute true mystical poverty. He began with time, and then men will not attempt to change their position without a sense that there is an adversary, an enemy, some opposition. But those on the great adventure have no adversary, save their own mind, and of course even it's not. A certain man who for some time had pursued the enlightenment decided to turn his energies to the enriching of his physical condition by appearing to have become a philosopher, and as his first step in this new career immediately presented his own magnum opus, which he entitled "Life Sucks and I Can Prove It," which he knew would be a success. The dumber the news, the more enthusiastic should sound its delivery. Mere originality of thought doesn't count for much, but it counts for more than its alternative. Another major mystical truth. Anyone who tells you that you cannot reach enlightenment unless you do this particular thing or that particular thing do not themselves understand what they are attempting to convey to you. If routine awareness is a flashlight and a higher level, the beam from a lighthouse, then the final state itself is a persistent ice within a fire. A just man was set upon by the unjust and later asked, what could they have been thinking of to do such undeserved harm to me? But a warrior's question would be, what could I have been thinking of to think about life? Relative consciousness is not the consciousness of the awakened. Any true transcendental path cannot be evaluated on its surface, for it has none. And even if, for public purposes, it does, it still can't be. Surface is thought, experience, experience. A mystic told a wannabeer, there are no guarantees in this kind of activity. Well, there is one, but it has to do with proper dry cleaning practices. The one thing you never can discuss with the mind is the fact that enlightenment is not something you think about. Yet another sterling benefit of this sort of endeavor is that there is no explanation for failure. All known and thus simplistic mystical traditions say that enlightenment has some public purpose, such as the awakened serve as an inspiration to others, etc., while the actual benefit of the state accrues only to those who experience it. From the collective view, it must seem selfless, and yet it is its own soul, raison d'etre. Thinking about what happens in life is how the mind distinguishes itself from life. The necessary beginnings of consciousness, but not necessarily the only possible climax. All superior intelligence must be mystical in that it must transcend the presently known. No matter what it may be called, to mentally stop the flow of life is not the way of the awakened. Even allegory must be updated. Those who know what's going on actually have nothing to say. But if those who know what's going on did say nothing, the trail leading to such awareness would be easily lost to man. A guy once asked a mystic, "Is there really any reason to do all of this?" And the mystic thought so highly of the guy that he gave no reply. You could say that when you no longer know what to think, you're halfway home. I had several questions over the last couple of nights having to do with some of the things I'd mentioned, so let's see how handily we can ignore them. Just a joke. I mean, there is a news item in there somewhere that any question that someone felt sincere enough to ask, I should be decent enough not to respond to it. Which, if you notice, it just coincidental was the last news item of the night. It was very similar to that. But me that as it may. If we consider, as I pointed out, that life is forcing everyone to strive to be more conscious. That could be put all sorts of ways, but that covers it. Life is pushing everyone, making each person in some way attempt to be more consciously alive. But even within that blanket statement, there is a kind of invisible cutoff line. It's very operational. And life, coincidentally, coevally even, makes man ignore where the line is, and that such a line exists. It, if for no other reason, made him come up verbally with the idea of euphemism so as to not have to call green, green, or up, or down, down. It has to do with something I was mentioning last time of the man, the person who was set upon by thugs and treated in a very uncivil manner. And his question was, how could this happen? The old question. What could, but he did it a little more specifically. What could they have been thinking? What do such people think? And we sort of ran out the last taping of me pointing out that they actually do not think in vis-a-vis the kind of person who thinks enough to be concerned over it. In fact, I was pointing out that if the man who had been mugged, the muggee, could take a lesson from the muggers, it would be that they walk away and forget it. They don't try to forget it. They just think so little to begin with. They're driven so, relatively speaking, so little by the intellect that when they commit such apparently uncivil acts outside the mainstream, they do not go away and drink. Every time they have a drink, think about it and laugh at him and think, boy, did we really do that guy in? Boy, did we really mistreat him? Which is the way those who think more do recall it. That, boy, how I've been mistreated, and why would they do it? What were they thinking of? And I was pointing out that compared to the mugger, the muggies, or compared to the muggee, the muggers do not think. The point I did not rub in your face because of either the tape ran out or some other reason But you do understand the same thing occurs in you continually. That you intellectually will now assume that all of you and anyone in the sound of my smell, my aroma, no, we don't speak in cliches. All right, anyone within sight of my voice. Anyone within the sound of my aroma. You should be sane enough yourself. You should be ordinarily sane and intelligent enough, being run by the mind, to know that you are continually mugged by the unthinking in you. Being simply mugged by other actual humans who jump out of an alleyway, that's one thing. But for someone attempting to become more conscious, you are continually mugged by your own nervous system. And that is not cheap allegory, that's expensive allegory. That is frightening allegory. I don't know anyone's ever described it in that manner, but since someone brought up the situation had occurred, and it is the basis, again, inside the electrochemical operations of the nervous system, it is the basis of having to take the polarized energy running things in the human intellect and attribute thereto ideas of a better polar and a lesser polar. Good polars, bad polars, sometimes known gods, anti-gods, goodness, non-goodness, even a slightly skewed version, the conscious mind, the unconscious mind, which is, as I point out, the same thing as the idea of good and evil. It's that the unconscious mind will do you evil, not because of some spiritual turmoil in the past, or not because that the human psyche is indeed a battlefield on which this is being fought. It is simply that there are things that occur either or have occurred to you that you have suppressed, or the idea of Western psychology taken at its broadest lemming would be that they're also in the, I guess they would refer to, well, the actual instinctive aspects of man, that they are not liable to, or they're not yet liable, I think, their position, to conscious control. The idea of the id, for instance, the idea that sexual energy is so unconscious, it is such a part of the instinctive aspect of man that it's all man can do to wrestle with it, and there's been whole schools of psychology almost based upon the fact that that's all civilization is, the attempt to suppress sex energy. That's just one instance. They are, as always, on the right track because the human mind cannot get on the wrong track. Well, it can, but the last humans who did were dinosaurs, and I'll show you where it leads. Well, they were dinosaurs. There are actually two classes. There were dinosaurs and liberal Democrats in Alabama. At any rate, back to the individual. You are an ordinary person, ordinary mind, to take even what I'd set up to now, they would still believe that there is some validity and that they are properly concerned with studying psychology, or perhaps, if they could afford it, undergoing analysis themselves or pursuing some would-be New Age kind of therapy. Whereas what you need to see is that you are continually mugged by your own nervous system, and there is nowhere to look for blame. Even if there was, it wouldn't do any good, because the ultimate blame is being alive. And if you can figure out how to do anything about being alive this side of killing yourself, then you don't need me anyway. What you need is an entree back into reality. But at any rate, those attempting to do something extraordinary through whatever method, through whatever system, through meditation, through prayer, through actually trying to pursue what they think would be the kind of behavioral changes that would turn them into a good blank, like a Sufi or a Zen, or pursuing whatever they believe would be, or is claimed to be, some traditional method. Then they believe also you've got no choice, because there's obviously opposition, or else you'd hear the idea of being enlightened or awakened to some new level of consciousness, and you go, okay, that's it, that's what I want. Where do I sign up? Or where do I send in my money? And you send your money, or bring it to the guy in person. He'd strap you in a chair, or slap you in the forehead, or do something, and that'd be it. Or he'd give it to you in a package. As you know, that's not the way it works. And so people attempt to do it And by the attempt to do it, it is the unstated, to ordinary minds obvious, reality that there is some opposition to it. In other words, it cannot be handed out. There's some reason that you are not in that condition now. Or there's some reason that when you hear about the condition of what it was called, whichever one struck your fancy, whichever one you liked, the Satori, Enlightenment, Maska, the Illumination, the Great Discovery, the Awakening, anyone that you heard, you went, that's it, where do I sign up, what do I do? And you find a book, probably whatever book or whoever you heard the term from at first, they go, well, just keep reading. It'll tell you in the next chapters what to do. And they simply rehash the actual experiences of some past person who had done it. And so as soon as you try it, you're aware of the fact. It shouldn't come as a surprise, but as soon as they say, go sit and meditate and try and stop thought, you go, God, I should have thought that myself. And so you're off and you get in a dark room or you sit down and turn off the TV and all just, well, you check to see that nothing important's coming on. So you turn it off, turn off the radio, and you sit down and you go, okay. You try a few minutes and you realize, this is not as easy as I thought. I mean, when I read it, it said, sit down, stop thought, and it'll come to you. Yeah, all right. And you find out you just can't quite just step into the next room and that be it. So the point is there's something staying between you and doing that. After that, you can end up living your life for that discipline or for a myriad of disciplines that you attempt. But what are you doing? Well, I'm attempting to overcome that which is staying between me and a greater state of consciousness, which is, and then all they can tell you is whatever they're repeating from the apparent discipline or the tradition, the doctrine of somebody. There is no opposition. Except you apparently are continually set upon by thugs, the unjust, set upon by those who seem to have, shall we say, seem to be lacking your best interest. Now to think about it. I know it starts out saying absolutely metaphorical to say that you're set upon by thugs within your own nervous system. That can sound almost poetic. Oh, how cute. Screw cute. All you got to do, you should be aware of it by now, that you're not, if you're doing it properly, you're not studying, you're certainly not studying me, you're not studying these tapings. If you are, I'm glad that I'm not exposed to the workings of your mind, not in some visual or, you understand that? Even too frantic for those who like rugby, played nude in the rain. You end up, if you don't watch it, studying a discipline. And it's on the basis of what I'm saying is that you assume that there is something opposing what you're attempting. And there does seem to be. But everyone looks in the wrong place. And I am still not going to grant you that there is any opposition. In fact, contraire, rather than use items again, for the 4,000th time I point out, there is none. Except the mind. The way tonight's read it said men will not. And of course, that's just a cheap way of making it sound a little bit more palatable. It's minds, which is the only thing we're talking about. But it said men will not attempt to change their position unless they believe that there is some opposition to change, some enemy. I gave you three: adversary, enemy, and opposition. And that runs the gamut. You can plug that in all the way from the most fundamentalist religious beliefs to the most up-to-date, sophisticated paradigms, psychologically speaking, of the human psyche. That covers it all. But you must believe. The mind has to. It's just the basis, the way it normally operates, that for me to move from here to there, not just physically, but it applies physically. Why would you move from Indianapolis to Fargo? Because you think it'll be an improvement. You think that in some way by staying in Indianapolis you are not fulfilling your best potential. You're not availing yourself of all the possibilities. You are not fully realizing yourself. Internally, if you can hear the idea of some higher state of consciousness, and even if you never put it into words, you believe, yes, it could be a higher state, which is to say that my present state is a lower state. That my present state is not acceptable to me. I know that. Or nobody tried to do anything. But then to think, well, what I've got to do is move. I've got to go somewhere. There's the tricky part. God, is that tricky? Because ordinary minds, ordinary men will not attempt to change their position. And now let's forget about moving from Indiana to North Dakota or South Dakota. Is internally. A man will not attempt to change his position unless, this is not the way he starts out thinking, but unless he accepts, unless he believes that there is some opposition to it. That sounds strange if you just put it that way, and that was the beginning and the end of it. Because then a man could retort, an ordinary mind could say, well, I do not attempt to change simply on the basis that there is opposition. But you are correct, every time I attempt to change, there does seem to be something, either in the external world or something within me, that makes change less than a fait accompli. But that's not really it. It's not that a man says, well, the only reason, all right, I want to lose weight. I don't think I look good, or the doctor says it's very bad for my health, so I want to lose weight. Or it could be I want to gain weight. But you know what it is. If anything you're going to try like that, it is not as easy. It's not just mystical effort. I was talking about that suddenly become enlightened, but you know a man decides, all right, I'm convinced. His doctor and his wife and everybody says, you're overweight. It's killing you. You look ugly. He goes, you're right. So what does that mean? He says, all right, you're right. I accept it. What does that mean? He's going to wake up tomorrow and be 30 pounds lighter? No, you know it's not. Does that mean that he's going to go, okay, well, then let's see. I'll just stop eating until I drop 30 pounds, which will certainly do it. That's the way to do it. But is a man going to do that ordinarily? No. But he would say, well, that it's not the matter that there is opposition that makes him want to change. You didn't get lost, did you? He would say, well, I'm trying to change. And you are correct, every time you try to change it appears as though there's some opposition. But it's more than that. If there was not the appearance, if there was not opposition, you wouldn't attempt to change, which I know is logically, sequentially, a non-sequential. It is illogical that the mind says, well, no. It's not that I only attempt to change when I know there's opposition. Yeah, it is. It just doesn't make sense. That's not the way the mind normally computes it. The mind would normally hear that and say, you're correct in this every time, or it seems to me, an ordinary mind would say, that every time I do attempt to change, there's always unexpected opposition, or there always is opposition, whether I'm attempting to lose weight, gain weight, quit smoking, cut down on salt, get more sleep, get less sleep, whatever it is not that easy. You're right about that. There always seems to be opposition to everything that I try to change. And if I said, okay, that's true, but that's a less than revealing description of it. A better description is that you will not attempt to change unless there is the appearance of opposition. Now the sentence makes sense, you understand? But in the ordinary world, that makes no sense. I guess there would be a name for a sentence like that, but there never has been because nobody deals with them. That the sentence makes sense. You understand exactly what the sentence says, but the contents. And it's not gibberish, it's the contents. You go, no. No. Yes. You are continually mugged by the older part of the nervous system. The simplistic, manifested commonly as being the more fundamentalist of the religious people, attributes it to evil forces, Satan, etc. The more sophisticated, at the street level definition, they attribute it to unconscious, subconscious traumas, forces, as yet untamed, feral, older, instinctive aspects of man. Yes. But it's still not opposition. Put it to you this way, if it is, you're done for. Because who's won? If you operate on the basis that there is opposition, if there's a battle between good and evil, between whether you're going to be more driven by the intellect and less driven by instinctive, older, outdated, well, relatively speaking, outdated bio-survival drives. If you've got any sense, if you have just a modicum of intelligence, look around and what does the collective intelligence of man tell you which side is winning? The bad guys. It always says that. Now you can stop for a second and I can pull this stuff about, well, hey, look around at history. Things are getting better. You're living longer than your parents, you're safer. You know, oh, yeah. But collectively, the nervous system of man, the part that speaks, always believes I'm up against such adversaries, whatever they're referred to specifically. The opposing forces, what I'm attempting to do, are so strong that any idea of success is sort of laughable. Refer you back to a news item tonight that said one of the sterling benefits of this kind of endeavor is there is no explanation for failure. See, if I hadn't thought so highly of the audience, I would have said there is no excuse for failure. But explanation sounds better. Just think about it. That's one of the great benefits of this. One of the real joys and pleasures, once you realize it, is there is no explanation for failure. There's nothing to say. It can't be excused, but it certainly cannot be explained. And there's a reason. I guess we had some part-time would-be mystics listen to this and go, and they just want to file it off in some strange, unconsidered corner of their memory that, it's something sort of mystical to say, well, the benefit of this is you cannot explain failure. It almost sounds metaphysical. It almost sounds poetic. It's straightforward. One of the benefits of doing this and understanding what it is, there is no explanation for failure. But look at it, point blank, that sentence. You know why? You know why? That there is no explanation for failure? It's not impossible? You know why? I'm not going to say the obvious, because it'd ruin it. In other words, I'm not going to tell you the answer to my own question. But why can you not explain failure? You could ask the world's great minds. There's some sort of experiment, and if we had a room full of atomic physicists and rocket scientists, how many of them would come up with the right answer? If they just played along, even not assuming that they understood the question, but if they had to answer it, would they ever come up with the answer? You are continually mugged by the lower part of the nervous system. You're continually mugged by the lower part of the nervous system in that it must continue, when it comes to it, to have the upper hand with ordinary people. Because ordinary people, if there was such a direct struggle as between the civilized, caring, charitable, religious, decent, humane aspect of man, which obviously would be this, up here above the level of consciousness at the line, then everything below here would be evil forces, Satan, Lucifer, the underground, the underworld, the subconscious, the unconscious, the uncivilized, the undisciplined. Right? But it's only those, it's a relative, you've got to remember a matter, the more you're dependent on this. That is, the more you are the part of the former descriptive group. The more you're up here, the more you feel that it is unjust, that it is untoward, that there is so much influence down here. And yet those same people that life forces to say such things, if they were suddenly given control of just themselves, individually up here, they'd go to pieces. Yeah. Absolute pieces. I guess that's sticky to see, to say the least. But how about this? What do science fiction writers, if we could consider that they have some intellectual wherewithal, especially into the world of would-be mysticism, what is one of the first things they come up with when they start speaking of the development of the human psyche or human consciousness, the human intellect? As soon as they try to weave one or two small dreams about what it would be, then they immediately will begin pointing out part of the opposition, and they will even expand it beyond specific things such as evil forces. They begin to have dreams, speculations that what man is headed toward is almost just a walking brain, or maybe just a sitting brain, just in a bowl over here, which was one of the old science fiction ideas, is that, or the other one, which is the same thing, but is the other one that has been, there's all the way from the first written traces of mysticism in Egypt and China all the way up until the day of so-called New Agers, people who believe that they're on some sort of mystical track, and etc. Who do they badmouth? What do they badmouth as bad as specifically and consistently as ideas of evil and etc. I'll answer it for you. Their body. They bemoan the fact, the Christian mystics, to use them. It is replete, the stuff that you found in the public record is replete with these would-be mystics that even had a glimpse. I'll give them that much credit. They had a glimpse. They had a piece of getting free from the ordinary restraints of consciousness. Almost a little piece of enlightenment, and then what do? It's understandable. They then began to whip, at least verbally and theoretically, the human body after that. And it's not limited to Christian mystics, of course, as you know, or you should know. But they bemoan the fact. They prayed, near Allah, God, Jehovah, Buddha, release me from the confines of this poor body, this carnal body. And it seems to make sense. It seems to be then the metaphysical adversary. Because look at all the things that you're trying your best. You're trying to sit and meditate. You're trying to pray. You're trying to put yourself in some sort of contemplative state to such a degree that you begin to join in union with God, with Allah, with the center of the universe. And what happens? Your mind hears the paper hit the roof. That goddamn little paper boy. Or suddenly you think about that little paper boy, and then you remember the last time you went to his house to complain, and his mother came to the door with a negligee. Now sex has started. Now you sit trying to meditate. Everything in life. It seems that everything out there in life is just arranged to keep you from becoming more mystical, right? Don't look out there. We've already been through that. Yeah, you can get mugged out there, but you can stay home. It's not the paper boy. It's not the sound on the roof. It's not the actual paper hitting your roof again. It was not his mother in a sexy revealing negligee. It's you. And you're not at fault. It's the human nervous system. You are being mugged from the lower areas of the nervous system. By mugged now, I assume that you realize I'm doing that with my tongue-in-cheek. I do not mean it literally, because there's nothing amiss. But as long as you feel like there's something amiss, as long as you attribute, well, what's happening in me, let's say that you apparently, by some observations, you experience some improvement, it would seem. That is, that you no longer attribute all of the drawbacks, all the impediments to your increased awareness and awakening to out there, which is very common that many people will get to the point that at least they will tell themselves, did you know, or they need to tell somebody else, of course, did you know that I now have reached the point I no longer blame everything that happens to me and distracting me from this great work? I do not now blame all of it on other people. And many people, I'll get them through, they can coast the rest of their life, because it seems as though that is remarkable progress. That I no longer, sometimes I'll suddenly hear the noise, sitting there trying to meditate, getting very close to Buddhahood, hear that clomp, and that damn paper boy again, and it's running my whole train of concentration. I just see Buddhahood slipping away again, and I say, you idiot! That's the way life is. He's just a little kid. We can't. You should be a better person than that. You should be more awake than that. And then I'll feel properly contrite about it, and oh yeah, boy am I no good. And that appears to be progress. It's not sarcastic. Not my comment. Many people will at least get that far, and then they can just slide the rest of their life. Because it's immaterial, but to them it does appear to be quite valid progress. Even if they can just do it once or twice. If they do it enough that they notice it and will say it or describe to somebody. And they go, you know what? I guess now that I think about it, I've read this for years and years. I knew it. I kept reading it. But now it strikes me personally that it's not just what happens in life. I mean, sure, we're surrounded by Philistines and people who have no specific interest in being more conscious. We're surrounded by them, like the paper boy. I mean, he's a 12-year-old kid, and I've tried to talk to him, I tried to reason with him, and he still will throw the paper up there, and I know, and it just upsets me. And the other day, I was sitting there doing my regular exercises and my meditation, and sure enough, bam! And this is him talking to one of his buddies. He says, And sure enough, my mind immediately went from just being on the outskirts of Buddha land. Suddenly I'm jerked back into, I'm sitting there, I hadn't moved, but suddenly my mind goes, that little imp, that little idiot, what the hell? And I thought, no. You can't continue to do this. You've been sitting here meditating 10 years, and he and his older brother before him threw your paper up on the roof every 3 or 4 times a week. How long are you going to let that drive you crazy? And it was almost like a small state of enlightenment. Wow, that's true. Many people, if they just get that far, just enough that they're aware of it, it is almost like I hate to even call it an awakening, but it's like sort of a preview of awakening. A trailer, for those of you who remember old-time movies. Like a little teaser, like, well, stay tuned and you might wake up a little. You know. It just seems like, well, it strikes people that, hey, this could almost be the way out of being bound and chained. What if I was still conscious? They can't even analyze it this much or they wouldn't say anything. But what they're feeling is, when those little, just like that, my examples of Fairwind, strikes them, something just seems to be justified. The kid's stupid, won't even pay any attention, will not even make the minimal amount of effort to be aware of how much that bothers you. You've talked to him, you tried to bribe him, you threatened him. But on top of that, look how unjust it is. You're sitting there trying to become more conscious yourself. You're sitting there attempting to do something absolutely extraordinary. And on top of that, life lets this happen, that at the very times you sit every day and get closer and closer to the moment of enlightenment, some little old nit shit thing like this will happen. But then one day it strikes you after only 20 years. And even that's not sarcastic, but because that's why I threw in the fact that this guy would go, I should have known this, because it's true. But I sort of threw that in as an extra one, that you can know something for 20 years. But you can see the same thing yourself in an extraordinary manner, and it's damn near world-shaking. And so that is that there you sit, and plump, throws you out of your state, and you're about to curse him, or you even do curse a little bit, and you think, wait a minute. And you take responsibility. And it seems as though it just strikes you, wait a minute. Do you realize that would relieve me from almost everything? Yeah. Except one thing, of course, and that is holding you responsible. But the mind won't even go that far, see, because that's the one thing you cannot discuss with the mind. To quote yours truly again, the one thing you cannot discuss with the mind is the fact that you cannot be more conscious by thinking about it. Now, I said that, but you can say it to your mind go, wait a minute, hey, we're getting somewhere. And your mind will join right in. Assuming that you and your mind's on a friendly basis, or at least. But that's the one thing you cannot discuss. And your mind will go, God, that's neat. So there you are. And it strikes you, wait a minute, I don't have to curse him. And it will normally come out with the mind as I'm being too charitable. It's not that I don't have to, it's like I shouldn't. I shouldn't curse the kid. It's my responsibility. I bet in some way if I meditate enough, and then it can really go wild, the person could go, I bet if I meditate enough, I could block out sound. And you fall into a trance, have a mini stroke. That is not the enlightenment, but it does strike people that this could relieve me of all these kinds of unprofitable, small-time irritants in life. That if I just did not attribute it to external forces, because I am evidently not going to change this. Use my example, that I have talked to this kid several scores of times, and I have tried everything from bribery to threats, and I've got to be an idiot to believe now that he's going to change his habit. As stupid as he is, as much as I hate his little face and I just hate everything about him now, I shouldn't be so stupid, because I should go ahead and wise up that he's not going to change. That seems as though it's a breakthrough. You understand? But you're still attributing some sort of conscious, or even worse yet, unconscious, unaware behavior for the sake of irritating you, or specifically known to irritate you. You ascribe it to other people. You attribute that they have the ability to either do it or not do it. But then you consider it success one day after only 20 years to go, wait a minute. He's not going to change. Maybe I can quit being so mad about it. And that is damn close to enlightenment at the ordinary level. People have staggered away. People have started religions on less than that. I mean successful religions, or at least successful cults, just on the basis of rediscovering it. Like every generation, somebody does, rediscovers, wait a minute. Of course, then they always get specific. It's like, some of the things in life you can't change. But what if I just quit reacting to them in the same way? And people just get staggered by that. So much so that they don't carry it any further, which life has all these safeguards built in. The nervous system operates in such a way that it guards itself. The true freedom from being bound by the mind, or bound by anything you want to call it, that the only thing that stands between a man and some other state of consciousness. I shouldn't tell you that. But I knew that when I started the sentence. I just thought I'd bring it up. You're continually mugged and mistreated by the lower part of the nervous system, but at all ordinary levels. That is, by the ordinary level of what, the level of consciousness at which people normally operate, were it not for the fact that the thugs, the unjust, the uncivilized in you did supremely, continually have the upper hand when it gets down to it, were it not for that fact, you'd be dead. Think about it. You would be like I got off of it, the would-be mystics. I assume all of you know that the most common cry from all forms of mystics is them bemoaning the human body. I mean specifically, Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu literature is absolutely full of prayers. And I don't mean just silly, childish things. Sometimes it's based upon people who've been very close to a true moment of understanding, of extreme consciousness. And they're always pulled back. I mean, it's not an either-or thing. At any rate, they always fall back and they attribute it to the body. They always will. Now, they may start a little more poetic, that is, well, I had sexual daydreams, or I got greedy again. I fell back into my old habits of trying to take advantage of my fellow man, trying to always be in competition, and that is detrimental. That's in opposition to a more mystical, a higher level aim. Yeah. But then they will end up attributing it directly to the body, and they will poetically, specifically, meditatively, they will decry the human body. Dear God, or higher consciousness, somebody, if there's somebody out there, if there's some higher force, if there's somebody more conscious, something more conscious, I see what the problem is. And at least by me admitting it and crying out, won't you help me? That is, the body. It's driving me nuts. And it all seems to fit. The mystical traditions all seem to be based upon non-physical activity. They seem to all be in some way a denial. Remember the way I was using denial, a kind of refutation of the body, that it is overpriced, it is oversexed, it is overgreedy, it is way overblown. Because the closer you get to having some moment of understanding, those first few times to men, it's like, I'm free from the body. I'm free from the mundane level of being a human. Which all those, they're great descriptions. But it's not being freed from the body, and the body is not the problem. And yet that's what they do. And what I was pointing out, if the mystics of the world, the would-be mystics, the would-be religious leaders, not those who understood something, but the ones who picked up the stories, if they had their way, if they could will what they believe on everyone else, it would be suicidal. It'd be murder on everybody. Because what they're saying, and one more time, it's understandable, because I will just bet you, we won't have to raise hands, that all of you have had a piece of this. To hear just any suggestion, whether you thought about yourself or not, but to read about suggestion that, hey, what you should be doing is applying yourself either to the soul, the spirit, the heart, the mind. But the body, forget that. It's playing no part. The body is what drags man down. The body is what, if you were Christian or Jewish, the body is what got man off on the wrong foot to start with. Everything was going fine until man physically succumbed to evil. He succumbed to the one thing that the Creator himself, the original force, says, all right, here's one thing don't do. And it was a physical thing. Don't eat that tree. Don't eat the fruit there. And as soon as they walked away, well, it didn't say as soon, but sooner or later, Adam had to be the most conscious guy on earth since he was. He finally gave in. There he is. Now let's assume they went days or weeks or months, and there's the tree. And he had all these other trees, everything you wanted, everything. And the higher force said, just one thing: don't eat the fruit off that tree. Everything else is yours. Have at it. See you later. And eventually, what happened? His body brought him down. Physical hungers, physical wants brought him down. So it all makes sense, and it's not just simply based on Western religious tradition. It's based upon the makeup of the human nervous system. That the older biological forces, those who think less, the muggers, the unjust of the world, the riffraff in you, apparently continue to mug you. But mug is the wrong word. If you had no more than ordinary consciousness, ordinary understanding, you'd be in worse shape if they weren't mugging you. Because they're the ones that keep you alive. They're the ones who are uncivil, who are unthinking, which is why the more thinking, civilized people continue to go, how can I be mistreated like this? What were those thugs thinking? What could they be thinking to jump out and mistreat an honest person like me? What could they be thinking? Almost nothing. Oh no. You don't know it. Remember, for those of you that didn't hear last week, is that kind of person. Not only then has lost their life savings, maybe lost part of their health by having an arm broken or an eye put out not only that, but the more that they deal, the more that they're oriented in the thinking than the body, the more they cannot shake the memory of it. And so they feel as though I have been mugged more than once. I was mugged originally, and now it's as though they're mugging my awareness. They're mugging my sanity. Because it's been 10 years, and I swear to God, there's not a day goes by that I do not think about that night. I relive it, that whole thing. It is so unjust. It is so despicable. It is so foreign to me. I would not do that. I wouldn't take a penny from a man if he was laying there dead already. It's absolutely unthinkable. Listen to the words. What could they have been thinking to do that? It is unthinkable to me. I know. But that's the way it's supposed to be. That's the only reason that they can do it. But then ask you. Now consider that we're not addressing ordinary people, those attempting to do something extraordinary. What is it that keeps you from doing it? Those of you, and we'll assume that most of you got some good taste, some strong suspicion. You've been so close. What is it that stops you? I could say, well, let's have a project. Everybody write down, and bring it to me next time we get together, next time you come here, mail it in to me, write down these things. I'd prefer you limit it maybe to 5. But that wasn't supposed to be funny. I was going to say, but see, that was to try and catch the unwary. Now, so all right, let's limit it to 5. The 5 things that you consider, just personally to you now. Now, if you want to throw in another paragraph like what you think maybe is the 5 basic ones that seem to get humanity in general, all right. But what I'm interested in is you personally, and you should be interested in you personally, is write down these 5 things. Assuming you find 5, that you might find there's only 1 or 2 in your case that strikes you. The things that you consider, the things that you know are the immediate, your personal stumbling blocks every time you try, and you know the kind of general direction to go to, but you're trying to be more conscious. You're trying not to be driven by whatever it is that's been driving you, that whatever it is that seems to drive everyone, but what it is that seems to get you, but internally, to you. Bad habits, characteristics, weaknesses. What are those? No more than 5. Write them down and write them down, turn them in, mail them in to me. Of course, it's easy to say that because anyone you write down, it's true. And if it wasn't true, as soon as you wrote it down, it's true. But notice it can pass for, if not some actual operational, functional progress, it passes for perhaps just a tentative step in the right direction. That is, as ordinary minds like to say, well, you sure can't deal with a problem until you know what the problem is. And it just almost makes your hand just take on a life of its own and go, I got to write that down. Okay. Those of you who are getting good, think about your hand wants to write that down. Consciousness doesn't. It's your hand. Well, wait a minute, let me write that. But we can't, there's no chance of coming up with a solution to a problem until we can at least enunciate the problem. Any scientist knows you cannot come up with a solution to a problem until we can properly, clearly define the problem, to state the problem. If there was such a thing as a problem, if we would use their terms, you're sitting on it. You're sitting on the base of it. It runs right from that part of the spine. I don't like to say the word. That doesn't sound good on television. Those, remember your high school physiology and anatomy. Anyway, it runs up the nervous system. You're sitting on it, and it runs right up. If there is a problem, you're sitting on it. Those of you that get better, if there is a problem, I'll change it. You're standing on it. You mean you've gone from the base of the spine to the feet? Sort of. Sort of. But can I hint, like, I call it charades. Can I, you're standing on the problem. Think about it. To show you again, it just so happens the way the mind works. If I insisted, if I said, this is the mystical, allegoric, well, this is the mystical message of tonight's taping, is once you get good, once you have some understanding, you understand that the problem, if there's one, is not out there. Okay. And it's actually not in here, not in the sense of your mind or subconscious mind, that if you get better, you understand you're sitting on it. People go, all right. And then I said, but if you get better than that, if you get some increase in understanding beyond that, you'll understand that you're standing on the problem. Now, I mean that. And what does people want to do? You want to go, think about it. You want to look at your feet rather than the earth. Which is very similar to saying, all right, the problem is here. And you go, I always knew that. It's well, I'm speaking for an ordinary person because of all the things I'm always. You're talking about the mind, right? And I go, yeah. Mm-hmm. But it's not actually the mind. We should say because the mind is nothing without its operation. And then the person say, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Thought. But it's thinking how we hate people, or how we don't like this group of people, or how I'm mad at circumstance, or especially some of the unconscious and etc. But you're talking about my thoughts. You don't see the connection. To say, the problem is, if you get better, you're standing on the problem. And you look at your feet rather than the earth. To say, all right, I'll give it to you. The problem is in the world of thought. And you go, I knew it. And what you do is look at what you think. Not what you think. That's back to those cheap. And I'm talking about deluded home exterminators. Did you think, well, yes, there's some bad roaches and then some not so bad. It's not a matter of what you think. What does it matter who mugs you? What if it was ordinary people? Would you feel... Now, an ordinary person could respond to this, which just shows you how far deluded they are. I was going to say, do you care whether you were mugged by a Hindu or a Jew or Indian or a Pakistani or Italian? And of course, some ordinary people, your first response was supposed to have been no, like, well, who cares? I got hit and robbed. But of course, the truth is that we know the more civilized, the more complex, just at the ordinary level, is a man's nervous system. After he gets over the initial shock, he will find it to be of some significance. He'll go, well, you're right. It's bad enough to be mugged, but I was mugged by a goddamn blank. And he'll fill it in, some other race, religion, nationality. Yeah, you're right. That's even worse. Which is really getting off the subject. That is just part of what keeps, it's the kind of friction energy that keeps the ordinary parade going. The first, what I was trying to point out back to the home exterminators, to say, why does it matter who mugged you? Your money's gone, right? And your eye's put out. Yeah. Why does it matter who? Your immediate response is, well, it doesn't matter. But that's not the point. That would take a few more minutes or hours for the ordinary intellect to kind of pull itself together and come up with even additional worries and concerns and agitations. That not only was I robbed and my eye put out, but it was done by a Muslim, or it was done by a Siberian or an Eskimo. The original one is, it doesn't matter, right? Yes, but then people say, if you say the problem, you're standing on it, but it's part of a cycle. It's a part of a flow of energy that runs through you, and it comes out here. It trips you to being a man at a certain level, a Homo sapien, and it goes back. So, if you're going to look for anywhere, because you're not going to affect the planet, you're certainly not going to affect out here, there's only one thing that you can affect, and that's where the energy flows through continually, pulsating through you, and it trips you into being a Homo sapien, and a thinking human. That's the only thing you're going to affect. Aha! Said the person. Now we're getting somewhere. That's the whole point of all these traditions of meditating and prayer and trying to chant, is you're trying to affect the things you think about. As always, it's so close. It's real close. And they go, well, give me a hint. Give me a hint. It's real close. Well, give me a hint. Give me a hint. It's closer than that. Well, give me a hint. There are not two classifications of roaches.